Hi there. Hi, my beautiful subscribers. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And this video is very, very special because it is a continuation of the discussion of the archetype of the sacred whore. Recently, I went on this podcast with Kiara Nation, and that podcast is coming out, I think, on Friday. So we got talking about a lot of things, and since I work with sacred sexuality, I work with you know understanding sexuality as a form of creation, because the sexual energy is the most creative energy of all. So my forays into the realm of twin flames and all the research I gathered over about a decade and a half, and of course looking into tantra and the various symbolism of tantra, and trying to understand the archetype of the sacred whore and the denunciation of this archetype and the complete and utter rejection of this archetype, and the necessity to pin women either as virgins or whores, and the complete degradation and deprivation of the whores. The whores in the ancient times were women who were sexually free. They did not belong to any women like the Vestal Virgins. Okay, the Vestal Virgins in Rome, they did not belong to any man. They were free. And they had, women were like cattle back in the days in Europe. So a lot of the times women had no power, especially wives and ordinary women. But the Vestal Virgins, or the sacred whores, or the temple priestesses, were very, very powerful women. They owned property. Okay, so we got talking about this archetype, and to truly understand why this industry, the sex industry, is such a difficult place of work actually. And I know this because I work with very, very many women who operate in this industry, whether they are sugar babies, sugar daddies, even men, because men oftentimes want to understand submission, domination, various kinks, and kinks have a spiritual origin. So I'm going to quote Carl Jung, and I will talk in detail about the astrology of domination, submission, try to understand sacred sexuality in great detail, understand entities that attach themselves to your sacral chakra, to other parts of your body because of the imbalance in the sexual energy. If you do not feel creativity, if you do not feel passion, it could mean that your sacral chakra is depleted. Also, if you are addicted to sex, that is also a signifier of some kind of deep imbalance with your sacral chakra, or some kind of entity feeding off that energy. Okay, so like I said, I'll be making a series of videos, and this is just a basic introduction to lay the groundwork for those videos that are coming up. The archetype of the sacred whore, and what are the specifications, okay, to this title, right? So Carl Jung, he says that the sexuality of man is more earthly, and that of woman is more spiritual. Okay, so immediately we understand that when a woman engages in the sexual activity, even if she's taking money for it, it is a spiritual act for her, way more than for the man. Even though the woman may not realize that, okay, I'm doing this and this is a spiritual act, she may not consciously know about it, but just the psyche of women, and the their sexuality being more spiritual, the woman will automatically gravitate towards the spiritual, even in a situation where sex is being paid for, right? So this is something we need to understand. And men, their sexuality is more earthy. They are looking for that quick release, that crescendo and the final crescendo and out. Okay, but for the woman, sexuality is very, very different, and this is what I will be exploring in the series. And what is then sexuality for someone who's being paid to do it? And believe me, I've spoken to women from New Delhi to Amsterdam to California to New York, women who engage in this profession, and women who've not been forced into doing this, who've not been sold into slavery. Of course, you understand that by streamlining sex work, we take out the trafficking component and forcing women. I also actually worked with a lady director who had gone repeatedly to this place called Kamatipuram in Bombay, which is one of the largest zones for prostitutes. And there I had heard that women were kept in cages there. I did not see any of that. I met a lot of women, spoke to a lot of women, because we were doing research to gather material for a character we were delving into. Finally, she made the film and it's on Netflix, so that's interesting. But to understand this the sacred whore, we need to look at her without the lens of patriarchy. We need to divorce ourselves from the patriarchal understanding, because if we don't, then we will fall into that dichotomy of virgin and whore, and label women who are sexually open, who are sexually expressive. We risk labeling them so, like a whore, she's a slut. Okay, so Kant was actually not an abuse. Kant was actually the medicine woman in the village. Later on, Abrahamic religions destroyed the concept of medicine women. Okay, so to continue the quote of Young, men and women become devils to each other if they do not distinguish their sexuality. What a man wants from the sexual encounter and what a woman wants, they are starkly different. Okay, so the archetype of the sacred whore literally uh, has intercourse with the man to heal the war out of him. Okay, to literally F the war out of him. Okay, that was the task of the temple priestess in very many cultures. Okay, in India they were known as Devdasis. Even Ramakrishna, he had a very favorite disciple called Girish Ghosh, and Girish Ghosh was very close to a lady who was known as Noti Binodini, and she was born into prostitution, but she was one of the greatest theatre actresses Bengal had ever seen. And Girish Ghosh was Ramakrishna's disciple, and he was a drunkard because he used to write theatre. So he was a bohemian artist, and everybody used to tell Thakur Ramakrishna that why are you allowing him, and why do you allow Noti Binodini? She's a prostitute. And Ramakrishna would laugh and say that you guys think she's a prostitute, but she's very close to the goddess. She's very close to the goddess. Okay, so you can do a little Noti Binodini Google, and you can discover the tremendous talent of this woman who people used to try to keep away from Ramakrishna because she was a prostitute. We also see Jesus and Mary Magdalene. See, Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. She was a tantric who was very well versed in sexual alchemy. So they started labeling her as prostitute. She was probably the greatest disciple that Jesus ever had. And rightfully so, she was his Bhairavi. In Tantra, a man takes a bhairavi to do sadhana together. Okay, so now another story that comes to mind is the temples in South India. When the English missionaries came, they were so shocked to see all these statues of human copulation that they didn't know what to do. These Christian, the original sin believers, they didn't know what to do. They were like, oh my god, these Indians, they're heathens, they are, like devils, they worship sex. So I want to clarify why temples in India have all these sexual carvings on them, from top to bottom, outside the temple. As you enter, they are not hidden from your view. They are huge and stark, and sometimes threesome, sometimes fellatio, cunnilingus, same-sex love scenes. So, we see it all. Now, some people think they're obscene. When I went there with my parents, and I was barely a teenager, and I was giggling to see them because I was surprised that what is this, men and women copulating in a society as repressed as India, and this is being shown as reliefs outside the temple. Like, what is the meaning of this, right? And my father explained to me that these carvings are meant to remind the ordinary human being to take care of his ordinary conjugal duties. Okay, that's one rendering, but there's just so much multiplicity to this. I'll get to it. Okay, now when throngs of people come to visit the temple and they see these reliefs, they're immediately reminded of their sexuality. And all these orgistic depictions, all these same-sex depictions, it means that the ancients were okay with it. The ancients were okay, they understood it. All these different sexes, like the Native Americans had 5 genders, not just the stereotypical male-female. So ordinary people need to be reminded of their sexuality and the tremendous power that exists right under their navel, right above the genitalia, the sacral chakra. It is the fundamental basis of all creation. Okay, so that was one reason to the ancients plastered all these reliefs on the temples. Remember who you are, remember what you're here to do. You're here to feel. You're not here to abstain from something that you really want to do. You're here to feel through all the sense organs, through all the reproductive organs. Okay, that is something that the normal people need to be reminded of, because sexuality is such a taboo in society that people are like, oh my god, sex, no, you can't even watch 2 people kissing on screen with your family or immediate. In India especially, you're like, oh my god. Now, I never had that with my parents. For my mom and dad, this thank god, they were very, very liberal, very spiritual, truly spiritual. So sexuality and spirituality go hand in hand, as they always taught me. One cannot be divorced of the other. And when I started looking into the literature of Tantra, then I understood that sexuality and spirituality are not divorced from one another. In fact, they complement one another. So like the normal person is supposed to remember his sexual desires, because those desires, they propel him towards something greater. Do you understand? They propel him towards living life to the fullest, to embracing love, to embracing that ultimate joy, the orgiastic joy, the orgasmic joy. So that's why the carvings were there, essentially. Okay, now my grandfather always said one thing, that if you do not do bhoga, then you cannot know moksha. Without bhoga, the path to moksha forever remains closed. So, am I gonna just go out there and, indiscriminately have sex? No. Again, it's the right balance. The right balance is the key to everything. Madhyam path, the middle path. Okay. Now, erotic sculptures in the temples are there to remind you of your dharma. Okay, the Sanatan dharma that was never devoid of sexuality. Maithun is an intrinsic part of it. Okay, now remember, spirit or the Godhead wants you to fulfill all the duties and the cravings of the physical body. Sex is not something abnormal, it's normal. Like eating, like excretion. You're supposed to do this, okay? Now, another thing is when you're spiritually pure and you are awakened, these beautiful reliefs in the temples do not shock you. They have no shock value, for they just are representations of Shiva and Shakti in the form of maithuna, the sacred alchemical marriage, or the hieros gamos. Okay, so understand, it is nothing to be made a big deal of. Like, oh my God, it's huge. Look at those carvings. No, they're just there. As I have sexual organs, you have sexual organs. We are all the same. Human beings have certain bodily functions, certain bodily desires. If you cut me, I bleed. If I cut you, you bleed. We both understand the orgasmic bliss. Okay. Now, another interesting thing why I think the ancients put all the reliefs there is because ordinary people are thinking about sex 90% of the times. So how do you segregate sexuality from your psyche when 90% times you are thinking about that particular topic? Ancients knew. So the ancients were like, bring reverence to the normal, bring something sacred into the mundane. And that's why I think when you walk through the temples of Khajuraho, you see these beautiful women in their gorgeous dance, and you have all these beautiful men, dancing with them or copulating, kissing deeply. They will put the French kiss to shame. These temples in Khajuraho in South India, they're full of them. So the ancients knew these things, that to bring the sacred into the mundane, okay? Because it is about this very topic that most people think about, and they are bored that they think about this. But they need to touch base with themselves and say, it's okay if I think about this, because that is the source of a lot of power. That is the source of a lot of energy that could come to us. So, why not use it? Why not balance it? Why not learn to work with it? I think that's what we are here to do. Walk each other home by not repressing sexuality, by definitely not saying that God will punish you if you masturbate. Because I tell my clients one thing, that if you do not know your body, if you do not know what pleasures you, how will you demand of someone to pleasure you? Because you don't know what makes you happy. So how are you going to ask someone to make you happy? It's all in the air then, right? It's blind leading the blind. So touching base with your own body is very crucial. And the relationship, the sexual copulation between a man and a woman is not profane. It's sacred. Because in that act, you can see Shiva and Shakti forever in their eternal coitus, birthing humanity. You can see the polarities of Jesus and Mary Magdalene play out. You can see the divine male and female at play, the goddess and the god at play. So there's nothing wrong with your sexuality, no matter what you like, of course, unless it's children or you want to hurt someone. And then, I mean, get the help you need. But if you have desires, it's normal. It's not something abnormal. It's not something to snub away. It's not something to hide. Although in astrology, the 8th house deals with sex and all things hidden. So we immediately understand, and it also deals with the unconscious. So a lot of our sexual energy stems from the unconscious, what turns us on. So that was a bit about sacred sexuality and the reliefs outside the temples, the sexual carvings, and how they shocked missionaries thousands of years ago. And drop me a comment if you're interested in learning about the archetype of the sacred whore and how the sacred whore heals a sick society, heals the men of a sick society. So thank you. Check out my website, like, comment, subscribe, and do not miss the series of videos coming up on sacred sexuality, the sacred whore, matriarchy, uh, human connection, and so much more. And as usual, I'll try to link it to astrology, but this is a subject that's been very near and dear to me. The goddess in all her forms. Even a sex worker is a goddess. Before Durga Puja, the Brahmin has to go to the house of a prostitute and collect clay. And from that clay becomes the base to make the idol. That is how sacred sexuality, the sacred prostitute, is connected to spirituality. It's not something we can ignore. It's not something we can hide away.